Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching. The channel's called Ratchet. My name's Andrew, and on this episode, we get a massive amount of work done to the chassis. Run the title. I've mentioned in a previous video the fact that I want to carry out some additional bracing to the back of the chassis. So what I want to do is add some diagonal bracing from the top of the shock mount down to the main chassis. So that's the plan. I've picked up some 38mm box section. The reason I've gone with box is because I want to carry my aluminium panelling up and around this new diagonal brace so it all flows nicely into the chassis. So I've got the box section. I need to suss out a bit of a plan of action because there are a few changes in plane and direction that I need to deal with these new braces. But let me start taking some measurements, start cutting some box, and let's see where we get to. Nothing too complicated about this in the grand scheme of things. Once I'd worked out the angles that I needed to cut the metal at, I just got the chop saw out and made those cuts, making sure they were nice and precise. Jumping over to the belt sander just to deburr the edges prior to test fit. And then mocking them up into place just with a couple of magnets to hold them in position. And everything worked out really quite nicely first time round. Then after that, dusted off the welder and stuck some metal together to hold them nicely in position. And here you have it all finished up, welds dressed back and ready to move on to the next stage, which is the modification of the aluminium panelling. I've got a confession to make. That last piece of footage was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had planned to record as much as I normally do, but it got to the stage where the filming was just eating up into too much of my time. So I've basically just knuckled down, put in every hour I possibly could do into getting the panelling finished up and getting all of the little jobs that still needed to be done complete. So I can finally strip the car apart, like completely apart, and begin the really rubbish job of getting this chassis prepped for paint. So what I'm going to do is give you a sort of a retrospective catch up of what's been going on in the last 3 weeks, because there has been an absolute ton of work. So you can see the chassis wearing all of its panels for the first time ever. Now, there was a few reasons that I needed to do this. One was for a morale booster, just to remind myself what I was working towards. The second one was, which was quite a critical one, was understanding the order that the panels needed to be fitted come reassembly. Now, there are some panels that can't be fitted before other panels are fitted, etc, etc. And because I've never had them all on the car in one go, I wasn't 100% sure if there were any, you know, small little pieces that would catch me out if I just started banging them on from inside out or from back to front. When I remove these, I will number them up, label them, something to give me some reference. So when I come to the final assembly, I'll know that I can't put A on until I fitted B, and so on. So that was something else. And the third reason was to really fine tune all of the fit of these panels. Now, when I first made them, I got them to a stage where I was happy with them. But now with the experience of making all of the other chassis panels, I like to think my skill and technique has improved slightly. So by revisiting some of these panels, not remaking them, but just giving them a minor fettle here and there, has, I hope, allowed me, or will allow me, to get quite a decent level of finish when everything is bonded and riveted in place. Now, I know these panels are never going to fit as if they were manufacturer made. You know, there are some GT40 builds out there that have phenomenal quality paneling, and I could only dream of getting to that standard. So what I've tried to do, to the best of my ability, yeah, I think that's a fair statement, is just try and take these panels to a level where I'll be proud of them. Now, if I was to remake all of these panels again, I'm sure I could get them better. I would add another return lip here. I would do that slightly differently. But, you know, you live and learn. I'm certainly not planning on doing that because the car would never see the light of day again. So let's get down to business, and I will give you a tour over the entire chassis, showing you all the details that I've incorporated, the work that has been done, because I think we're finally there. The first job was to get these coolant pipes out of the way. Now, initially I'd thought to try and work around with them still in the car, but the more I looked at them, the more they annoyed me. So what I did do was cut off the 90-degree soldered joint that passed through the rear bulkhead. That then allowed me to slide the pipework through the front of the car and get it out of the way. Once I'd done that, I could assess what I was working with, and what I've done is made a more robust bulkhead detail for the pipes to pass through. Now, the old bracket was just riveted to the chassis. This one I've made picks up on, well, not only the coolant pipes, but the two holes above it are for the handbrakes cables, and then above that, which you can just about see, are the three bulkhead fitting holes for the clutch and brake lines. So that's going to give me a far more robust detail to run all my services through, not only from a strength point of view, but also a waterproofing point of view. Coming down to the front, I've also made the new front panel. Now, that was the final panel that this car was still wearing. So I've remade this with the location for the steering joint and all of that fun stuff. I also added a second coolant pipe support to the front of the bulkhead, because this car had only been fitted with the rear one, and by the time the pipework had passed through the length of the car, it was just sort of flapping around all over the place and there was no real support to it. So it did seem like a bit of a bodge solution. So at least this way, I'm now going to have these pipes supported along this whole length. All of the holes will be grommeted, obviously, and it's just going to give me a far more robust detail. Now, coming to the front of the car, for those of you that have been following for quite some time, you may recall that I've made these lower panels with a sausage shape cut out of them, for want of a better phrase. Now, that was because the coolant pipes ran so close to the chassis that they in fact fouled these new panels that I made. Now, what I'm going to do is introduce a longer length of silicone hose, which will allow the pipes to curve around much nicer and not foul these inner panels. So I have remade both of those, and I think it's just going to end up giving me just a much nicer result. The back of the chassis has seen a huge amount of work and time been spent on it. Now, the bulkhead remains pretty much as it stood, but everything else has been remade. Now, you'll know that I needed to make this back panel again to suit the bracing and the inner top panel, but I've also remade on both sides the outer panel. Basically, it was just fine-tuning the initial design that I'd come up with. Now, if you do something twice, you know, the second time should turn out better than the first time. And that's thankfully what has happened. It's just a slight tweak here and there, which now gives me a far nicer fit and finish and hopefully quality of end look. Now, what I have done, and something that I've done across the entire chassis on all of the panelling, is introduced a step bead roll. So that basically then allows the top panel to dress over the side panel and run through flush. So I've done that on these top panels, on the bottom under tray panel, and basically everywhere else through the chassis. So using the same principles used on the rear of the chassis, all of these internal panels have been bead rolled and stepped so they line through flush. The side sill panels, back panel, absolutely everywhere. So I think I'm finally in a position where I feel comfortable enough to get all of this panelling removed, or get it marked up, get it removed, get it stored, so I can move on to getting this chassis prepped